For those of you using the Creative Cloud version of Photoshop, this video probably isn't all that applicable to you. But if you're using an older version of Photoshop and you buy a new camera, then you could find that the raw files the camera creates can't be opened up in these older versions of Adobe Camera Raw that came with your version of Photoshop. So if that's the case, then what I'm about to show you is probably going to be useful to you. Adobe created a raw file format of their own called DNG, Digital Negative. And they've also created a raw converter that can convert your existing raw files into the DNG file format. Now, this file format is what's called an open source piece of software, so that camera and software manufacturers can incorporate it at no cost into their own equipment and software. The whole idea is to future-proof raw files so that they can always be opened up in many years in the future. You can get the raw converter from the Adobe website at no cost, and there's the web address there if you can see that. There are different versions of it. There's the Windows and the Apple Mac version, and this was the converter at the time of May 2016. It's a simple method to download and then install onto your computer. And this is the interface once you open it up in your computer. You've got where to find the original images, where you want to save them to. You've got options for changing the file name, and there are some preferences here, some important ones which I'll cover a little later. So, some of the reasons why Adobe created the DNG file format in the first place. As of 2016, there are over 600 different raw file types, and each time a new camera comes out, the manufacturers tend to tweak the raw files such that those new raw files cannot be opened in previous versions of Adobe Camera Raw and similar software. A raw file can only be opened by specialist software, such as Adobe Camera Raw, software that comes complete with the camera. When you buy the camera, you usually get a disc with some raw conversion software on it, but that tends not to be quite as sophisticated as Adobe Camera Raw or other types of raw conversion software. And as I say, each new camera usually introduces modifications that prevents it from being opened into older types of software. There's also the problem that some of this software that you've got may not be compatible with newer versions of computer operating systems. We've seen this when we change from 32-bit technology to 64-bit. And the operating systems, the latest operating systems, often won't allow you to install some older versions of your software, which means that you can't access your old raw files. Converting your camera's proprietary raw files, Olympus, Nikon, Canon files, into the DNG type is one option for trying to circumvent this future possibility of inaccessibility. There are also some benefits. DNG files can be read by any version of Adobe Camera Raw back to version 2, and that was shipped with Photoshop CS1, assuming that you ensure compatibility options are set correctly, and I'll show you how to do that. This means that using the latest DNG converter, downloaded for free, you can convert your brand new camera's raw files into the DNG format, and this can then be read by your older version of Adobe Camera Raw. Any adjustments you make to a DNG file are saved in the file's header, part of the actual file. not as an external XMP file, which is always the case with a camera manufacturer's RAW file. DNG files are usually a little bit smaller than the original RAW files. All of the original data is preserved in the conversion, subject to certain preferences, which again I'll cover. Now there are some problems, of course. You're restricted to using a limited range of compatible software. But of course, if you're using Photoshop and Adobe Camera Raw, then there's no problems. Certain photographic federations don't allow DNG file entries. Now, one of them is the Wildlife Photographer of the Year. Now, the reason being is that it's now possible to convert JPEG and TIFF files that have been heavily manipulated and altered into a DNG file. So for all intents and purposes, it looks like it's an original as taken image, even though you've done all sorts of work on it. So for this reason, these competition, they don't allow DNG file entries or images that appear to have originated from a DNG file. Your camera's RAW conversion software will not be able to open up DNG files. But again, if you're using Adobe Camera Raw all the time, this should not be a problem. And of course, we're relying on Adobe to honor their intention to continue support for this file format into the future. Now, this just shows you the slight difference in file sizes as created. So the first image here, you can see it's 25 megabytes, and when it's converted to a DNG file, it goes down to 22 megabytes. And those are similar sort of figures for each image. So there's a slight reduction, depending on the options that you change. And of course, I will show you how to change those options in a minute. Okay, so let's open up the DNG converter. There you go. It's a fairly simple interface. So the first thing we need to do is locate where our original RAW files are. Then we need to tell it where to save those images to. It actually creates a duplicate. I believe at one time there was an option to convert and delete the existing files. There doesn't appear to be that option anymore. So when you convert, you're actually creating a duplicate, a copy, but in the DNG file format. So let's go to select folder, and I've created one just for this video. So resources for book, and we've got that there. Now it says no match here, but believe me, the images are there. So these are the original camera RAW files, the Canon RAW files. I'm going to select that. That's the source. Where to? Save in new location, or you could save it to the same location. I'm going to save it to a different location. You need to tell it where. So I'm going to tell it to go to demo raw conversion to DNG. Okay, so we've got before and after. That's where it's going to go to. We also can change the file name. So one useful way of doing this is to go to year, month, date, and you can see an example of how the file name will appear. So year 16, 05 May, 18th of May. We can also give it a name here. So I'm going to space dash space slim bridge, because all these pictures were taken at Slimbridge, the wildfowl trust. Space dash space, and then we can give each image a numerical number. I'll do a 3-digit serial number, and you can see again how that file naming will appear. And we've got the beginning number at 1. You can also change the whether it's uppercase or lowercase. I'll leave it at lowercase. These here, that's just about, it just tells you about this raw converter. This extract is only useful if you've embedded the original raw file within the DNG file. And for most people, that is not something that is a very useful option, but it's there anyhow. Now let's go to change preferences, and in here we've got the compatibility. So you need to understand which version of Adobe Camera Raw your older version of Photoshop came with, and you need to make sure that the compatibility is selected so that it is encompassed within this selection. So if you're using Photoshop CS3, then you'd need Camera Raw 4 selected here. Otherwise, again, CS3 Adobe Camera Raw would not be able to open the DNG files that you've selected. So if in doubt, you can always go back a little bit earlier. But of course, you're losing some of the inherent abilities of some of these DNG files. If you're using CC, then just 7.1 and later, which I'll leave that as that. You can change the JPEG previews from non, medium or full size. And as it says here, full size and embed fast load data will slightly increase the DNG file size. But I have those selected like that. Compression. I'd really advise you not to use this, but you have options here now. If you click on there, you can see there's a whole load of options to limit the size of the raw file created, and you're not really saving it as a pure raw file anymore. You're introducing compression, it's been non-linearized, and all sorts of things. So I'd get rid of that tick and just leave it as a full high quality raw file. This original raw file can be embedded within the DNG file, and you can then extract it, as I showed you with the previous there. You can extract it again. I'd recommend, I never use this anymore. I did at one time, but I found it doubles the size of the DNG file, and I never had a need to look at the original again. So I'll leave that unticked. So select OK, and now we can convert. So it's from to file naming convention convert, and we get this little window up here, and you can see the progress as it goes through. I'm going to open up File Explorer, Windows File Explorer, and that is the destination folder. You can see them being generated, and in that file, using that file naming convention I've created there, you can also see that these file sizes, because I created a JPEG, a large JPEG, it's still a little bit smaller than the original file size, but it's only by about a megabyte. So we'll just wait for that to fully generate. You can see it's going through the sequence here, and of course you can do this to hundreds or even thousands of files, and just leave it processing overnight if you wish. So processing, browsing, and once it's finished, you can just say OK, and either go back and do some more processing or exit. And that's how you convert using the Adobe DNG Converter.